Perfect. Going live. Hello, everyone. So, welcome back to another session. So, this time it's a panel discussion, and it will be moderated by Eric Tauler. He is an experienced global project manager at AstraZeneca and leading cross-functional drug development teams in late-stage oncology. I will invite Eric to take the stage and introduce his team of panelists, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Metamsa, and thank you to the Y Conference for organizing what I think is a very important discussion, that is getting teams aligned on strategy. And we have a couple of really great speakers here that will give you some feedback on their views. We had a third, but because of technical difficulties, not her fault at all, not able to join, unfortunately. But still, I think we'll have a good conversation. I think to introduce the topic here, that is getting aligned on strategy, I want to first introduce an idea, and Susan and Noel may complement this in their own discussions. But first of all, if we're talking about alignment on strategy, what is strategy? So I wanted to baseline everyone in terms of at least what I think strategy is. And strategy is moving from the what you want to do to the how you want to do it. So this is an example that I've used many times in various talks, including I think with Y-sponsored conferences about project management. And so if you imagine as an analogy, the what is getting from a dirty car to a clean car, then you have many ways of doing it. Of course, you as a good portfolio and project managers, you just make many decisions about the scope of work, whether you're going to consider a hand washing or a full detail, how much can you spend, whether it's enough for the hose, or whether you're going to go for that full detailing. When's the time in your day that you have to do it? How long can you be without your car? And are you going to get a full hand wax job if it's just going to rain tomorrow? All these kinds of things. And as you go through all these different options of how to go from a dirty car to a clean car, and you make those choices around these constraints and with these risks in mind, that is what I call strategy. That you pick a certain strategy to implement to get to a clean car. And so that I provide only as a maybe a backdrop for the discussion today about getting teams aligned. Now, so who are we going to be talking to? I've already been introduced, and I'm the least important person on this panel as a moderator. We have Susan. Susan, I hope you don't mind. I snagged a picture from one of our recent conversations.
I see that.
Without you knowing, but I thought it was a really good picture. I took a few of them just to see, and I thought this is a great picture of you. So it was a little casual, but it's really great. So Susan is, as it says here, she's a senior vice president at PAC Pharma. Her specialty is really in that small pharma world. And across IT, technical operations, clinical research and development, and everything around strategic planning and governance. Monica, who won't be joining us today, but I'll try to stand in for the best I can for her, crosses that from not just small biotech, but she's actually worked in the sort of a medium and large biotech area. So would be able to provide that perspective. And last but certainly not least is our most senior person, most experienced person on the panel, Noel, who is a consultant that helps all types of companies, not just pharma, but has lessons learned across many different companies with different products about how to accelerate core business vitality, do portfolio management, do project management, and those are our speakers for today. So I'm going to stop sharing this because there's really nothing more for me to say, and we're going to open it. I think we really much would like this to be a interactive session, but we'll start the session with some background thoughts by the panelists, and the background is going to be really in your own views. We'll start maybe with you, Susan. In your own views, what do you think strategic alignment is, And how do, I mean, answering the question directly, how do you get teams aligned on strategy?
Yeah, no, great question. I'm happy to chime in. I liked your analogy of the car, by the way. What a simplified way to really break it down. Which way are you going to get the car cleaned? Which I need to actually map out my strategy for that too, personally. But just to kind of add to what you said earlier, what is strategy alignment? It's pretty simple. I think that's just that, what is our plan of action designed to achieve the overall objective or aim? So what is the plan of action? Which path are we going to take? And then on the second question, how do you get teams aligned on strategy? I really wanted to just hone in on the alignment piece because I think that's so important. So do you know what needs to be aligned? Where making sure you have defined what the objective is that you need to accomplish with your team. And, as Eric mentioned, I mean, governance is part of my remit at work too. So, our governance model is definitely around alignment. So you could go, from consensus to alignment, which we kind of view in the middle, all the way over to kind of executive decision. So really it's, working with a team to get alignment, which is what is the decision that you can live with? Maybe you're not completely on board with, but it's not, focused on getting full consensus. So I think that's really important. And from the PMO perspective, like how do we facilitate and how do we enable that environment or dialogue? So, there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight, and then I'm sure others will weigh in here, but the people kind of focusing more around the people component. Do you know your key stakeholders and what their positions are? Are you able to create an environment that allows you to put the key issues on the table? Looking at what the pros and cons are, or the risks and benefits of which path you're going to take, and then really making sure that your key stakeholders are weighing in on that. And then I wanted to just highlight too, when I think about getting teams aligned is, I think particularly from the PMO perspective, one of the key roles we have is as a facilitator. So how do we focus the discussion on the key data, the issues, et cetera, so we can ensure that everything is fully assessed so we make the best decision. And that means we need to have an environment that's transparent, allows open flow of communication. And, we can talk more about, that's kind of focused more at the team level. There's also getting alignment across the organization, both up and down, and maybe I'll hold and chime in on that later as we kind of proceed. But really, kind of just some key takeaways would be, what kind of creating that environment that fosters that level of conversation within the organization. And then defining what are your goals, your risks, assumptions, what's the schedule, making sure that's clear, and then documenting that. And then, we can talk more. Maybe like I said, I'll save that later for like, how do you get alignment across the organization? But if you're just focused on the team, that's kind of where I would start.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add that I kind of think of this in different layers. First of all, I work with a lot of companies that don't have a clear strategy, and when I guess you can even talk about, are you talking about your business strategy or your innovation strategy, your functional strategy? So there's kind of different elements of a strategy. But a good starting point, or the way I like to think about a strategic alignment, certainly let's just take innovation strategy. That needs to be, where do we play and how do we win through innovation, maybe organic innovation. It doesn't have to be organic, to accomplish our business objectives. But the key connection between that layer of strategy and the team and the projects we're working on is, I think, the discipline of portfolio management. So that's that connection point, or that linkage between the higher level business and innovation strategy and then where we place our bets. So it takes, first of all, leadership articulating clearly what your strategic objectives are, and having that cascade down. If you're in a large company, that needs to cascade down to the business unit level. And then there's a business unit strategy that needs to cascade down to the projects that you're investing in. and you can even break those portfolios further into your core business and your new growth business if you're looking to break out and create new sources of growth. So there's that cascading effect. But the companies that do really well at innovation portfolio management, that link between the two layers is, they communicate that strategy. They are clear on the investment allocation across either growth horizons or different markets or different categories of or product types, or maybe even technologies. They make clear what the financial goals are, 1, 3, 5 years, or however many years out you're measuring, and where the gaps might be relative to the projects that you're working on, and then how do you fill those gaps. So and the other thing I'll say is it's a dynamic process. I think a lot of companies make the mistake of they set their strategy annually and they don't revisit it until the next annual planning cycle. I think these days, with the pace of change in most of our markets, certainly biopharma, the pace of change is just getting more and more, it's accelerating more and more. So you have to revisit that strategy periodically throughout the year, quarterly, or in some cases semi-annually, but it depends on the company. So revisiting that strategy and confirming alignment with a bottoms-up analysis of what you're investing in. Does bottoms up equal top down? And that, to me, really summarizes whether or not you have alignment. Does the top down match the bottoms up?
That's great. Thank you both. Mithun, feel free to interrupt if we get questions, but I want to make a comment and also summarize where I think what the two of you said was a little different, but where it comes together very nicely. So, at the risk of maybe saying the wrong thing, I will say that I was introduced to a medium-sized company some years ago because a former boss had moved there to take over project management and asked me to join him. And I'd never heard of the company before. Turns out it was CSL Behring. For those who you may or may not know, it's a small biologics company, and it's so small that I would run into the CEO at the gym, on a regular basis. So it was big enough that it was a global company, but small enough where I knew all of the C-suite people, and I wasn't that high up, so that everyone did. And I remember him appearing on, I think it was one of the finance, Jim Cramer or something, and him asking Paul Perreault, the CEO, saying, how is it that a company of your size can have $4+ billion in sales? And his answer, which I think speaks to what both of you said, was he said, look, we know what we do, we know what our mission is, we know what we do, and we know what we do well. So we keep focused on that, and we stay within our own strategy. And he says that way we don't end up, any mistakes we make are all within the area that we know. And if we don't know it, then we go get someone else to do that part, which they've done, like in the oncology area. So that was just I thought it was a nice little tidbit anecdote that sounds like it resonates a lot with what you were saying, Noel. Where I think perhaps Susan, what you and Noel said, where it sort of comes together, I think I took sort of what you were saying, Susan, as speaking from the top down, and Noel saying, and then once that comes down, making sure that the bottom up still make sure that there's a single version of the truth, and that those top down sponsors still know about it. So as I was thinking about it, I was thinking that this is so similar to, let's say, earlier discussions we had about change management, where we said, and you could say, look, any clinical undertaking is a change. I mean, it's a change in what is in our portfolio. It is a type of change management. We're now going to have a new drug or a new indication or something, and just like any change management is a project. So and just like any project, you need a sponsor. So I was sort of thinking, as you were saying, Susan, that governance is our sponsor. And so, and as a sponsor, that sponsor is going to want to make sure that, well, what is my overall mission of my organization, be it a department or the whole company, and what are the gaps that exist in realizing that, and from there, as I think, as you were saying, like having that filter down, cascading down, as you said, from the senior most people who are defining the mission and the vision, and then going down and say, okay, how can we realize that vision, and then having that then at the project team level, executing the vision, and then feeding back up the truth of like, yeah, that you thought that this is what you wanted to do, but let us let you know, by the way, there's these other things. Maybe it's external people that are now playing in this space that we didn't anticipate. Maybe it's new regulatory guidelines that we didn't participate. Maybe it's supply chain issues that we had no idea were going to happen. Now it completely falls apart our timeline, and that. So, Mitham, I'm assuming there are no questions since you haven't interrupted, but would invite.
Eric, I just wanted to add another point. There's a couple of places where strategy collides with execution. Many of us use a gated development process, and the purpose of a gated development process is to have the leaders at a certain key milestone ask the question: does this project still make good business sense? Mm-hmm. And especially in the early gates, it's important to ask the right questions about how does this project fit in our bigger picture strategy? How does it advance toward our portfolio objectives? If we're trying to have a better balance of more new growth innovation and less incremental innovation, and you keep bringing me these low risk incremental innovations, then we should maybe ask some tough questions about that and say, hey, well, we said top down that we wanted our mix to be a certain percentage for incremental and breakthrough, but we're getting way too many incremental. And that's when you have to look at your priorities and say, maybe we should reprioritize some of those. So the two collide at these gate review points. I think that's one important place in addition to just portfolio reviews.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think most mature companies have some kind of stage gate process built in where it's predefined that there is a predetermined review. But I think I understood that what you were referring to, Noel, was that regardless of that, as things come up, that there also has to be a constant a review of, there's a probability of tactical success, the same as what we thought 3 months ago, even though the stage gate is not for another 6 to 9 months. Maybe something's changed, or the regulatory success probability has changed because of some other external factor or even internal factor. So, Susan, anything you want to contribute? Yeah.
No, I just wanted to highlight that it looks like Monica has been commenting. So,
okay.
We've been talking along. So I don't know if you can see that if you click on the stage.
Let me see.
We could add her thoughts in. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. Does everyone, Mitham, does everybody see the stage?
Yes.
I can see it too. Okay.
Okay, everyone can see the stage. So Monica was on our panel, so she's commenting here. So it looks like we've been missing it. I've been missing it. So thank you, Susan, for pointing it out. And she's commenting faster than I can read. But what she said, okay, so she's joining from the audience. If you can't see it, I think as an introductory statement, she was saying that keeping teams aligned to the organizational mission and vision by ensuring the goals are delivered on time from strategic, operational, and logistical perspective. That's a mouthful. And constantly iterating and keeping in line with the evolving landscape, as Noel and Susan articulated. So I think that's very much in line with what both of you have already said. And as Monica makes a point of keeping it dynamic. All right, let's see. So here's a question. So we actually have a question now, which Susan and Noel, I'll let you answer. First, what tools do you use to align strategy and project value, resources, and risk?
I can start, Susan. And so first, most companies, when they're building these capabilities, portfolio management, resource management, risk management capabilities, Excel works just fine. But there's a point when when you're scaling a company where when you have these disconnected spreadsheets, there becomes the administrative burden of pulling all the data together and having accurate data. It just becomes unwieldy when you get too too big. So there's a certain point in your growth trajectory where you have to consider off-the-shelf PPM solutions, project portfolio management solutions. So there's a class of enterprise software out there that does just this. It helps you have that common database where you can have that, one source of the truth, where project teams are, as long as they're keeping their data up to date, you can pull that together, analyze it, run what if scenarios, and they can support both linear and agile approaches to development these days. And they're getting pretty advanced in terms of their using predictive analytics and using some algorithms to help you get better resource and schedule planning accuracy. But one caution on these tools, on the tools question, is you got to be careful and have a kind of a measured approach to rolling out these enterprise software tools. They're very powerful and they can overwhelm the organization. And if something goes wrong, people are going to blame the tool when normally it's the process or the behaviors that are missing. So you just have to be really think hard about selecting the tool that's right for your company, but also making sure it's scalable in a way that it gets adopted, because no tool is any good unless it gets used.
That is, I couldn't agree with you more, Noel. I currently am at a small organization. We're only around a little over 200 employees, so we don't have an enterprise solution at this point. It doesn't make sense yet in the organization. So what we're using primarily is like Smartsheets or Microsoft Project, Excel. So they are disconnected. It is a lot of manual work, but that's kind of where we're at as an organization. And I think, having been also at a larger company when I worked at Alza, which was part of J&J, I remember we had an enterprise solution and we rolled it out. It was using Planisware, OPX2 back then. And, I know what you said earlier really resonated with me on, how you roll these out and making sure it's appropriate so that, the tool doesn't get blamed, etc. We spent so much time in this. It was intended to be the solution, and there were definitely challenges in the adoption of it.
So somebody's asked me to put some tool names in the chat, so I'm going to do that right now.
Yeah. So no, I asked you because Vladimir was asking to be more specific. I've worked with OPX2 back when it was OPX2, and work with Planisware now. And I agree with what Vladimir says. I don't think. Although it's sort of the standard across many companies, most people are not very happy with it. It's more of a resource driving tool. It's terrible with visualization unless you use Tableau, which Monica uses, and even then it's quite unfriendly. Still seems to be the power horse, driven mostly by the finance group. What I wanted to ask as a follow-up question to Noel, while he's typing, and to Susan as well. So when you're talking about these tools, Noel, I'm quite familiar with some of the ones you're talking of. There's Monica giving a shout out for Richard. So I'm sure Richard appreciates that. Richard Sonnenblick is the owner of Enrich, so that he does have this quite sophisticated tool to use. I'm sure Noel has his own tools as well. But the question I wanted to maybe ask if you guys could elaborate on is when it comes to these, like, let's say, portfolio management tools, and they often will start from the very top. What are the key criteria are the objective measures of value, and then they get measured down. Can you talk a little bit about who in the organization, let's say a medium to large size organization, is responsible for putting in which parts? So obviously the team is going to be providing the bottom up of saying they're the ones that are going to know the PTS of a certain study, let's say, and maybe the details, but some of the top strategy comes from the top. So can you maybe in the last couple of minutes, the both of you speak a little bit to who provides what information when it comes from the top or from the bottom with regard to the portfolio?
Yeah, so the data comes from the project teams, and that's the other advantage of a phase gate process. It kind of galvanizes teams and gets everybody to update their data. But obviously, we'd like to have it updated more frequently than that. What I like to do is separate analysis from decision making. So in the terms of governing your portfolio, I like to have a separate team that's cross-functional, that's got that represents the business, and depending on the size, but the makeup of that team will vary depending on your company. Your mileage may vary, but that team is responsible for doing the analysis, running the what-if scenarios, looking at resource constraints, and going to a decision team with a set of recommendations. And the reason I say it that way, to have these two separate teams, a decision team and an analysis team, is that you want your portfolio review to be a decision-making forum. Nothing gets me more frustrated than going and sitting in on a portfolio review and it's just a status update where the teams come in and present their red, yellow, green charts, and management just sits back and picks apart different projects and tinkers with the details. What I recommend you do, and these tools are an enabler for this, is to come to the meeting with the data already, the numbers already crunched, and the recommendations already there. And then you can focus that meeting on decisions about, okay, what are we going to do to change our priorities because something changed in the marketplace or something changed on some of our key projects, and the discussion, and you leave that meeting with a clear set of outcomes and decisions on how to course correct, as opposed to trying to do it. So there's a role for analysis, a role for decision making, and there's a role for the teams for data input.
Susan, do you want to add to that?
Well, I don't know how much I have to add, since your question was geared more toward medium to large size companies, and it's been a long time since I've been in a large one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just shout across the hall, "Hey, what?"
Yeah.
So let me follow up then. I see some nice chat going on on the side, but Noel, can you talk about? I'm sure this has never ever happened, but let's say you go to the decision making rule, the numbers have been crunched, and some C-suite guy goes, "No, I don't believe it. I don't like it." Even though they set the attributes early on and they said these are the most important attributes and this is how I want the things evaluated. Now fill in the details and run the algorithm. So how do you deal with that? Let's say the CEO has a pet project that doesn't really fit the strategy as they've articulated, but how do you incorporate that into let's say the portfolio management and the overall strategy, since we're talking about strategy?
Do you want to start on this one, Susan? I want to give you.
No, go ahead. I got a little distracted on the comments coming in. So please.
Oh, okay. No, so on the pet project problem. So the CEO pet project, the only way you can combat that is with data and what I call evidence. So the more you have to agree on what are your evaluation criteria, so you can keep it objectives, take some of the subjective nature out of that. Being realistic, the CEO is going to come in with that pet project from time to time, but the more you can justify it with data, and if you're in your core market, you can you all have your ways of estimating, your NPVs and your ROIs. The challenge that a lot of companies face is when you're dealing with uncertainty and you're further away from your core, you're doing something new, maybe new technology, new science, or new going into a new market or a new kind of maybe a new business model, and there's higher uncertainty. Then I would rely more on evidence, customer evidence. So that's the build, measure, learn. Let's get some MVPs out there and get some feedback from real customers, not just feedback, but actual currency exchange. Not just asking them to tell you if they'd buy this new idea, but getting some kind of commitment, whether it be their time, their email address, their social security number, whatever commitment, that would be the evidence I would look for to validate and raise my confidence in an opportunity that's highly uncertain. And when you take that customer evidence to the decision makers, it's hard to combat that. Even if the CEO has a favorite pet project, you can say, well, where's the evidence? So look for what customers do, not what they say, and then combine. Don't just rely on financial estimates when you're in uncertain territory. Try to back that up with some customer feedback or evidence. Yeah.
So I have something to add to that. I know we're almost out of time, but it's coming at it from a different angle, because certainly this resonates loudly with me with the CEO pet projects. And I think at a small company, then you're taking all your resources and putting it on whatever the CEO just went out and asked for. So what we did is we actually worked at the angle from the governance perspective of, really getting buy-in that we're going to make decisions on what projects, and we're going to do it this way with these key people involved. So really working to make, new project decisions more at the EC level than just the CEO. So that's how we were able to rein it in. But again, that's coming from the small company perspective.
Very good. All right, Mitham, I think we easily used up all of our allotted time.
So thank you, everyone. So I guess you have answered the questions, and
poor Mitham, he's getting tired. Yeah, no, he's in Europe.
So yeah, do we have any unanswered questions? No.
I think the chat was mostly discussing some very specific requests from between Vladimir and Noel and Monica about tools and techniques, which I think they're going to connect to each other via LinkedIn. We had a very good discussion about getting alignment on strategy. Both from top down communication, from the governance, which is also similar to a sponsor, and in some realms, as well as having the project team or those in the trenches feeding the information back up and making sure that there is a regular check-in in case one of the critical attributes that inform that strategy changes, and that's even beyond the normal stage gate process, which may or may not be introduced. And we also Noel talked about for some time, how do you deal with pet projects that are the favorite child of somebody in the C-suite, and try to combat that so that it is on, so that you do help keep the company on strategy. I think that was the key.
Thank you. Wonderful recap. And I also like the fact that you mentioned at the beginning that PMOs should be facilitators, and we should be really encouraging transparent environment with an open flow of communication. So great insights. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Noel. And with this, we'll go quickly backstage, and I'll be back with the next presentation in a minute.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Noel.